Good morning. I want to continue our study on unity to address the conflicts in America right now. And I want to share a little bit of my experience with life and conflict and how I've tried to separate myself from others and how I create my own enemies. First, let's bring forth where we left off yesterday. I illustrated, or at least stated, that all media, large portion, huge majority of media is extremely dishonest and propagandic. And when we agree to ourselves to digest that media, we're agreeing to poison ourselves with dishonesty and misinformation. And then the question we left off with is, why do we choose to do that? Why do we choose to constantly feed ourselves information and content that separates us from other people? Why do we do that? And I ask those questions because it is my belief that this chaos in America and in the world is a result of individual cowardice. We're too fearful to look at ourselves and to question ourselves, and as such, we end up being driven by hundreds of forms of fear, deep feelings of loneliness, separation, anxiety, anger, resentment. There's all kinds of things within ourselves that drive our behavior that's causing all these problems. I think all spiritual growth starts at the individual. I think all culture is built from the individual. If you think about it, all the movies that create our culture, all the music that creates our culture, if all of those people creating those things were aware and courageous enough to face themselves, our culture would be a completely different place. But instead we have people that just want to run from the ego and create songs to make money. They don't care what the consequences are to other people, and we get the results that we have today. So that being said, I would like to share some of my experience with this current conflict. I have been guilty of contributing to it. I have been guilty of creating isolation amongst people and myself. Most importantly, myself. Most of my life I was in strong conflict with myself, but from a political perspective, I grew up in a rural area of America, and as such, Republican leanings were the primary political perspective. Conservative ideas won out amongst democratic ideals, and it was just the way I was raised and the climate I was born into. I voted Republican for Bush. I voted for Bush Sr. He was the first president I was allowed to vote for legally. So I voted for him just because he was Republican and was supposedly, in line with church doctrine and Baptist beliefs. I since learned otherwise. I think his behaviors, contradicted everything that was in the Bible, or a very large portion of that. So from him, there is great loss in the nation. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of deaths in the Middle East, which I was not proud of. But then, the financial collapse came. I became extremely disillusioned to Republican ideals when I saw all these bankers get these bailouts from the government, and then I saw Obama continue those bailouts. He seemed to have, for me, he had very little interest in working people. My life as a blue-collar person got worse under his presidency, which was unfortunate because I really liked the idea of liberal ideas. I liked the idea of free college and free health care. I loved having those safety nets in place. But living through his presidency showed me that maybe the Democratic Party did not agree with those things to the extent of making them functional. I don't agree with a lot of his policies around Obamacare. That ended up costing me substantially more money than before it existed. I think my insurance premiums went up, I don't know, I think it's 120% a month. I went from spending $280 to $300 for a good health care plan, to last time I checked, my insurance rates were $520. Now I know age is a factor in that, but still, that's a lot of money for someone who's blue collar. So I got really upset with the Democratic Party as well, and we'll get to this later, but I'll just keep going. During Trump and Hillary's campaign, I became neither Republican nor Democrat, but what I became was anti-left. I was strongly anti-left. I absorbed myself into podcasts and YouTube channels and speakers that were against the left. They were independent voters that just hated the left. They hated what they stood for. They hated cancel culture. They hated the idea that that there were people getting oppressed in what they had to say. Like if you had a conservative idea, you weren't allowed to speak it without running the risk of, a bunch of people that represented the far left of the Democratic spectrum calling your employer, threatening to boycott their business and getting you fired. I was against that. I think that's horrible. The idea of, mob rule scares me, and it's something I would like to see legislation be written to eliminate. It's a very destructive force. But in being anti-left, especially now, I started looking at why I was so angry about the left. Those principles I don't agree with, the ones I just talked about, but why am I approaching those principles and those ideas, my disagreement with them, with so much resentment? And I had to question my resentment. In my mind, it was me versus them, or us versus them. I joined a team of people that were anti-left, and our enemy was the left. And I had to look at how much control I gave to politics for my well-being, like my emotional serenity. I had to become aware of how much content I was absorbing myself that reinforced my beliefs. I would not look into their perspectives. I wouldn't study their ideas. I thought they were idealistic, but not realistic. But, why did I have all this rage and anger about it? And I had to become self-aware. And one of the things that happened was I personally felt attacked by the far left. I felt like my life was at risk. My safety, at least, was at risk. My quality of life was at risk by the behaviors they were acting out on. And so from that feeling of unsafety, I joined a group that opposed them, to the point where I started losing friends, right? Like if they started talking about extreme left rhetoric or ideas, I just lost tolerance for those people. I no longer saw them as people. I saw them as ideologues. I saw them as the enemy, and I removed them from my life, right? Like I created conflict. I created division in my own life. And it's been my experience that division first started with me inside. Like it started with me being unwilling to look at my fears, unwilling to be wrong, unwilling to let other people be wrong, unwilling to let other people be human. Like it's possible that people that oppose my ideas, they probably genuinely think their ideas are good, right? And I never took the time as an adult to learn how to negotiate ideas, how to find middle ground. It was just one way or the other. It was black and white thinking, which happens to be a symptom of narcissism. And I have no problem admitting that I have narcissistic tendencies. I didn't like the idea that that's who I was, but I do have those tendencies in me. And I couldn't do anything about them until I got the courage to look within myself, to look at why I'm behaving this way, why I have these thoughts, why I have these ideas, why do I want to create conflict. And that's a point of responsibility I don't see many people taking. If I have feelings of conflict or resentment towards someone else, it has a lot more to do with how I'm responding inside myself to their ideas than it has to do with their ideas. You know, the ideal is if someone has an opposing viewpoint, I don't have an emotional reaction. You know, I don't want to attack them. I don't want to think they're stupid. I don't judge them. Like, that's the ideal. But how often is that really the case in America anymore? I don't think it happens very often at all. I think we've become so dependent on having an enemy in our lives that we're afraid to look at why we need an enemy. And it's been my experience that I need an enemy, I need someone to fight against, because I don't want to look at my own loneliness, my own feelings of shame around being who I am, my own feelings of separation. You know, I think all these people are different from me. I think they're evil or wrong. And that's not the case. You know, it's my own judgments that are getting my own way. It's those feelings, those deep feelings that guide our thoughts and our behavior. Carl Jung referenced it as the shadow, and I believe that true enlightenment or true transcendence of destructive behavior comes by facing our shadow. And we can use mindfulness to do this. It's very simple, not comfortable, but very simple. And we can start very simple and we can start very small with mindfulness. And the first thing I want to talk about, we left last week, you know, why are we digesting all this media when we know it's destructive? But also, let's just start small. Become aware of our thoughts. Throughout the day, we have lots of thoughts. There's a lot of spiritual teachers that suggest just watch the thoughts, just be mindful of the thoughts, you know, they're just a cloud moving through the sky. I kind of disagree with that. I think that's a good technique when we're at work, we don't have the space or the time to challenge things or to really sit in the quiet and get in touch with these things. But it's also a great way to become neutered to reality. You know, I don't want to be a spiritually neutered person. I want to be effective in life. I want to be able to conquer myself, to conquer my shadow, and to move through challenges in a very effective way. I want to live a life of spiritual abundance. I don't want to be neutered. So what I've learned is my thoughts are important. They're very important. If I'm going through the day and I'm constantly having a thought of judgment towards someone or some group of people like the far left, I need to stop when I get home and I have time to sit in the quiet. I need to stop, let that thought come into my consciousness, and when that happens, I can take a deep breath and I can grab that thought and I can use that thought as the tip of the spear and follow it down to its root. The thought is just something that's trying to get my attention to something deeper. And with practice, this probably won't happen, you know, in your first attempt, but with practice, I can take that judgment and I can bring it and follow it and use mindfulness and the power of the moment and focus to go all the way down to where it's being fueled, like to its roots. A lot of times for me, those roots are deep-seated feelings of shame. You know, I'm not good enough, I'm not broken. So I use ideology as a drug to numb that out. Feelings of separation, you know, I'm alone in this world, I'm not safe in this world. I have no comfort or peace at my core because I refuse to look at these dark emotions. And with mindfulness, with learning to cultivate the power of the moment, which is our true power, in my opinion, we can dig into those feelings, we can experience them, and we can start not just dissipating them or healing them, but supplanting them with something better. Like, we're all in this together, we're all doing the best we can. We might be clumsy at it, we might be unskillful at it, we might be ignorant on how to do it better. But we can learn new information to remove that ignorance. Like, we have that capacity if we're willing to admit that what we're doing is unskillful and damaging to ourselves and to culture. But in my life, by not willing to face those deep-seated feelings driving all these judgments and behavior, I was at conflict with myself. And by being in conflict with myself, I was in conflict with others. That's how reality works. What's in our core comes out and manifests within our external world. So my encouragement, and you do have to be courageous to do this, I think. I think it's one of the more scary things that we can do as humans. My encouragement for you is today, be aware of your thoughts throughout the day and maybe make a note of a thought that seems to be repeating in your mind. A judgment, like let's focus just on a judgment of someone that has a different belief than you, someone who's wearing clothes you don't like, whoever it is. Like if there's a judgment that keeps coming up, write it down on paper. And then next time you have some quiet time, preferably over 20 minutes, sit down, be aware of that judgment, and practice looking at that judgment with a sense of compassion, right? Like hold the judgment in your open hands, like you would hold, a pile of sand or something. Just hold it there gently. Let it be what it is, and let it open up. That judgment will open up if we approach it with compassion and love, but also persistence. Let that open up. Let it show you what's underneath it. Bring your courage with you. You may notice that as this judgment opens up, a lot of feelings begin to come up, a lot of discomfort. There could be a lot of anger, rage. If you have trauma in your past that you never dealt with, that might start coming up. Because we use judgments, we use ideology, we use group mindsets to run away from our shadow and who we really are. But if we continue to practice becoming into a state of integrity, these things start losing their power over us, and then our outer lives improve. We find more peace, more harmony in the relationships. We end up running into people that are like-minded, they're spiritually oriented, and life seems to give, at least this is speaking from my experience, life seems to get us more of what we're actually after, which is, to me, strong, healthy community. Not community based on hate or judgment towards others. So that's my challenge for you. I hope it's useful. It's, highly probable you won't be able to follow a single judgment all the way to its core the first time. That takes practice. You might have to practice meditating and just watching your thoughts for, several weeks to maybe a few months before you're able to grab just one judgment and bring it down to its core. It takes a lot of practice, but that's just how life is. Everything that's worth doing takes practice. I hope you have a good day. I hope you really think about what the content of this message is. I hope you bring it into yourself. I hope you talk about it with other people. It'd be really helpful to share this information with others, this video or this podcast. To like it, leave comments if it's impactful to you. And I'm building a community at mindful.locals.com. It's going to be a community of like-minded people that want to grow individually. They want to grow personally. They want to become better, stronger people so that they can impact the world effectively and positively by creating more peace, more harmony, serenity, compassion towards others on an individual level, because that's where all change starts is with the individual. So thank you for sharing. I really do appreciate it. We don't have a marketing team, so it is super helpful if you could do that for us. I hope you have a good day again. Really be mindful of our situation. Be mindful of when we're getting pulled into arguments. And, just remember we're all people doing the best we can, and that all conflict starts within us before it starts out there. Have a good day.